All right. Well, how's everybody doing today? It's Sunday here, Sunday afternoon. I hope everybody's had a nice weekend. I'm going to cover a few updates. It's been a little while since we've had a community call. I think it's been about 6 weeks or so. But it's nice to touch base. We'll talk a little bit about, the current state of the app, some of our upcoming incentives with the Arbitrum STIP. We will talk about the Looper that launched over the weekend, as well as the facelift to the Lodestar front end landing site. If you haven't checked that out yet, it's pretty nice. Sushi did a really good job on getting that updated. And then we'll also talk a little bit about staking, like the first, I guess not epoch, but the first 3 month period is kind of coming to an end here soon. So anybody who may, have chosen for that 3 month locking period on their load, they're coming up on their relocking period, and we'll kind of talk a little bit about some of that stuff and how it's going to tie into some of the Arbitrum STIP incentives as well. So, where do you want to go first, Waffle?
I mean, we can start with a small recap of what happened since staking was launched. I mean, we are in Epoch 10 now. We had a small downturn on TVL, like everyone is aware, but I think we're right back on the good tracks. 26 million TVL. Last I looked, which is I think an hour ago. We also crossed the $100,000 protocol revenue since launch, which is also a great number to cross, right? And super cool. And we are also at the end of the 3 month locking period for those who locked for 3 months. So now it's the period in which the locker can actually select to choose to relock his tokens. You can relock for 3 or 6 months. And we'll be doing some marketing about it this week and in the next coming weeks. But whenever you relock, you get a yield boost, a staking boost. So those relocking 3 months get a 5% boost. Those relocking 6 months get a 10% boost. So this definitely can make the difference, especially for those who are long-term committed. So we're in that period right now. But we also have a few surprises coming this week regarding the staking module. Stay tuned and check out the forums. We'll be having a post coming pretty soon.
Yep. So we definitely have an exciting proposal coming up. How much of that are you trying to keep under wraps? Should we leak a little alpha here while we're on the chat, Waffle?
Yeah, okay, let's do it.
All right.
Let's leak a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's keep the details for the forum.
We'll do. Yeah. So basically, we've got an idea that we've been working on with the community council that will help boost up some staking rewards a little bit more. I'll save some of the details for the forum posts like Waffle would like. We'll be hosting a governance vote on some proposed changes. But the alpha that I will leave is that it should have a significant impact on staking yields for the better. Mostly just increasing the amount of fees that Lodestar is able to accrue on a weekly basis.
Super sweet. So yeah, stay tuned for the forum post. I think I'll be writing it tomorrow. We'll go live also at the same moment with the recording of this community call and the newsletter. I didn't do a newsletter in September. I'm very sorry. Everyone's been a little bit busy, but I'll be posting probably at the end of this week a big 2 months newsletter with all the recap of all that happened.
So the next thing we've got coming up, obviously everybody's very excited for, is the Arbitrum STIP grant. So just to kind of give everybody up to speed with where we sit with that right now. So we've completed the KYC/KYB section last week, and so at this point, we've kind of cleared the major regulatory and compliance hurdles. So at this point, we're just kind of sitting tight and waiting for the actual distributions to get started. I will say, however, if we do have somebody in the community with an accounting background or a tax advisement background or a fiduciary background that's in the United States, please reach out to us. Or if you know somebody, we're trying to make sure we navigate the tax section of this grant properly, and we want to ensure that we're able to pay the entire grant amount out without having to pay a portion of it in taxes. So we just need somebody to come and help us out and figure out how we can do that, legally and in compliance with the rules and regulations. So if you know someone, let us know. In the meantime, we are seeking out a firm to advise us on our own, but we would love to work with somebody in the community if there's somebody with that skill set.
Yeah, it wouldn't make much sense to pay taxes on something we're just taking custody of and redistributing to the users. Would you like to jump on the details on how this tip will be distributed?
Yep.
Contact groups.
Yep. So the vast majority of it, 95% of the weekly STIP allocation is going to be just simply going to people who provide liquidity in the form of depositing and as well as incentivizing borrows on the platform. So it's going to be a pretty straightforward formula. Basically, every user, we're going to have the value of their supplied assets measured in ETH plus the value of their borrowed assets measured in ETH, giving them some total. And then there's a grand total for all users. And so an individual's allocation of that weekly ARB is simply their total divided by the grand total. Whatever that percentage is the percent of, ARB that will be airdropped to their wallet from that bucket each week. And so the way that's going to work is we'll have two random snapshots throughout the week where like a block will be chosen at random. We'll use tools to randomize the process. And on that block, we'll snapshot whatever the balances are on the app at that time. And then there'll be a second block where that'll happen at some point during each week. And then your average position across those two blocks is kind of what will determine, your allocation for that week. So that takes care of 95% of the STIP. And then the other 5% we'll be using to incentivize gauge participation. So as you guys know, for all 3 and 6 month load stakers, they get voting power in the weekly emissions gauge. And when they vote on supplying or borrowing incentives for various assets, the following week, those assets get more of a share of the emissions. And so we want to introduce more people to this process as we view it as a core part of the protocol, and to help kind of get the word out, almost as a bit of a marketing tool, perhaps. We'll be incentivizing this process. And so the way that will work is every person has a certain amount of voting power, which is determined by the amount of load they have staked and for the length of which they have it staked. So if you're staked for 6 months versus 3 months, like the person who stakes for 6 months is going to have more voting power. Kind of makes sense, right? So proportional to the amount of voting power you have on any given voting week in which you vote, that will be the proportion by which you receive that portion of the STIP So again, that's going to be only 5% of the STIP. So basically, everybody who votes, they'll split that 5% on a given week, proportional to the amount of voting power they have. So that's the plan. I think we don't have hard timelines just yet for when this will get started. We're still kind of waiting and seeing what's going on with the Arbitrum Foundation about like when they want to get started. But we're pretty much ready to go when the distributions actually go live. We'll push a front end update. That'll show the addition of like the ARB incentives on the front end. So it'll be kind of similar to what you're used to, where you'll just see like when you highlight over like the little APR modal on the front end, you'll just see the APR you're getting in ARB as well.
Any idea how we will choose the randomness of the snapshot? Or are we just going to choose like random number between 1, 7, 2 times and choose at that moment? I mean, the whole point is to avoid gamification. Is it just,
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say we've built out that logic waffle I can share with you, and then we can decide if we want to end up sharing that outward. But there's a give and take with how much being transparent with how we randomize versus gaming the system, right? So I think we have a sufficient method in place now, but we can always talk more about that.
Yeah, so I mean, from a high level, we'll just be using a tool to randomize, so there's no bias from our perspectives. But what we will do, as part of our compliance with the grant, we will be documenting everything, so that at the very end, when we're done and the process is completely over, we'll be able, to show basically the entire process documented. That will be, someone could go back and audit the whole process if they wanted to, for transparency purposes. Ideally, we would have done this thing 100% on chain, and it would have, been a lot easier. But, unfortunately, there was just no easy way of doing it without having to edit some of the underlying protocol code. And given the fact that we've just gone through this very extensive audit with Halborn, and we're all in a place where we feel really good about the protocol code, we didn't want to rush through some kind of change and then try to quickly audit something before the STIP launched. I mean, as you guys, a lot of you know, when we went through this last audit with Halborn, it's not exactly a quick process, right? And you don't really want it to be necessarily a quick process, because you want your auditor to really take their time and do things with a fine-tooth comb. So, that just wasn't really an option for us. So, unfortunately, we kind of have to do this quasi on-chain method where, we're tracking everything with on-chain events via subgraph. However, the actual kind of distribution is happening via an airdrop rather than like a smart contract.
it's also straightforward and doesn't need any, like, it avoids also the gamings, right? People just farming, leaving. Here you just need to legitimately provide some liquidity and borrows, which I think is also very fair and was recognized by the community instead of just dumb farming.
Yeah, I mean, let's just take a moment to talk about that. Wow, I think everybody on the team is just totally blown away, by the amount of support that we got during the STIP process. So I'd really like to say a special thank you to all the community members who have been there and supporting us all this time. Special shout outs to Mogi, special shout outs to Primates DAO, for putting our little Lodestar Needs You poster on their little tool. So many people did so much stuff to help us get here, and thank you so much for all the support. It's definitely an honor for us to be seen as one of the most unique and Arbitrum focused protocols, and it's just no amount of words to say how much I appreciate the support you guys have given us. So we're really looking forward to the whole STIP process. I think inadvertently, just the process of going through the STIP was great for exposure. It was like some really free marketing for us in some ways to kind of get the word out to anybody who wasn't already familiar with Lodestar that like, hey, we're here, like we have a strong community, like the rest of the Arbitrum ecosystem is behind us. And we are the Arbitrum Maxi money market. So, come and check us out and join the community kind of thing.
Definitely feels good to be sitting in the ranks next to some big players of the ecosystem, and especially players that are dedicated to Arbitrum. I love that also that the ARB voters have prioritized those who are committed to the ecosystem itself and who weren't just like jumping from one chain to the other. Or it's very fine to be multi-chain, of course, but the fact that the ARB voters and the delegates have given priority to those who are loyal to Arbitrum feels very good. And like you said, the fact also that the amount of votes and the support from literally everyone has been very positive about what we're building here as a community. So yeah, very encouraging for the future. And I feel that this tip incentive distribution is really going to bring some positive outcomes for the ecosystem. So yeah.
All right, let's switch gears and we'll go into the next topic, which is going to be about the looper. So that went live over the weekend. So we'll give a quick, we'll do a quick how to, like what it does, what is it. It's basically just a convenience tool at its core. So what it allows you to do, which is user behavior that we've observed on the app, for example, is that a lot of people will choose to put collateral up of a certain asset. Let's just use Bitcoin for the example's sake. And because of the load incentives, what's often the case is that you can borrow more Bitcoin and then redeposit it on the supply side. And that can actually be profitable in a lot of cases. In fact, most coins on the site right now, that's the case for. So, another benefit of this, right, is because you're borrowing and supplying Bitcoin, right? Like, no matter what the price of Bitcoin does, it's not going to change your collateral ratio. So it's also a very safe position. So we see, widespread across the app, people choosing this strategy. So we figured, well, why not try to make it easier so that this can all be done in one transaction rather than several transactions, and then charge a little bit of a convenience fee on it, which, all, like as usual, all fees charged on Lodestar are going directly to stakers. This is not a fee that's going to the team or to the treasury. All these fees, are in the same bucket as anything else, and go towards load stakers. But basically, how it works, if I come and I say deposit $100 worth of Bitcoin, I can go and enable the looper and do the approval for the looper to spend my Bitcoin. Then I can either choose to multiply it by 2 or multiply it by 3. For the sake of this example, let's say we chose 3. So I deposited $100. I asked for a 3x multiplier. So what this does is it basically flash loans $200 worth of Bitcoin, adds it to my supply balance, and then borrows $200 worth of Bitcoin from Lodestar and uses that $200 worth of Bitcoin to repay the flash loan. So your final position after depositing $100 worth of Bitcoin would be to have a supplied balance of $300 worth of Bitcoin and a borrow balance of $200 worth of Bitcoin. So it's basically, at its core, just a simple leverage tool to help people loop their positions without having to do it a bunch of times. And we kind of hope that over time, as more people sort of become aware of this arbitrage opportunity, that as more people kind of hone in on it, like the arbitrage opportunity in theory should shrink, right? And the overall market should become more efficient. Like the liquidity market on Lodestar should become more efficient. So it's also a little bit about education and convenience. So
In the case of PLV GLP, Conta, you deposit PLV GLP, it borrows USDC for you, right?
correct, yeah. So I'm glad you brought that up, Waffle. So specifically for PLV specifically, rather than looping the same asset, since you can't borrow PLV GLP, that's a permanently disabled feature. Um, you know, for I won't get into all that, but for reasons like with the original version of the protocol, lessons learned, like we'll never allow borrowing of PLV GLP on the platform. But doing it this way is sort of like leveraged longing PLV GLP. So if you think that Bitcoin and ETH are going to rise relative to the dollar, and you also want to cash in on those juicy fee weeks like we have this past week on GMX, this tool will allow you to kind of take advantage of that. And especially with PLV GLP, I mean, I think anybody who's done it before, like looping PLV GLP just takes forever because you have to borrow something, go to GMX, buy GLP, go to Plutus, like convert it to PLV GLP, come back to Lodestar. There's just so many transactions involved to just loop one time. Where now the looper will just kind of take care of all that stuff for you.
Yeah, and you touched on it, Quanta, but just something to note, like you can either deposit out of your wallet balance and to use as part of or the whole balance of what you're looping, or you can just loop what you already have on Lodestar. So your wallet could be empty. You just need to have a state in the protocol that allows the loop to occur. I couldn't remember if you qualified or touched on that, Quanta, so I just wanted to state.
Yeah, no, I forgot about that part. Thank you for mentioning that. Yeah, so you can either use a balance that you have in your wallet to loop or your balance that you already have on Lodestar. That's correct. And then I would just add one last point on the looper. This was in scope for the Halvern audit. It has been audited. If you go and look at our protocol report, audit report, you'll see the looper contract mentioned there. But however, I just want to give like the one, security caveat. Basically the way the looper is working on like an underlying basis is you're giving it permission to borrow coins on your behalf. So obviously, like if that looper was exploitable, like someone would be able to borrow on basically on against your account's liquidity. So one thing the Lodestar team like kind of recommends is basically when you're not using the looper, just don't keep it enabled. I think we're all very confident in the outcome of the Halbarn audit, but you can never really be too careful, right? So, if you want to use the looper, I would suggest, spend the 10 cents after you're done using it to just disable it. That way, if anything that just in case something happens, right, you're safe. And so it's worth it to do that.
It's just good practice. Whenever you don't use a smart contract, revoke the authorization. We got your toggle over there. Granted authorization, do your looping, and then you're done. And then whenever you don't need it, just take out the grant, and you got the UI for that. Just a safety measure. And good practice.
You'll see on the UI on our site, like there's a little like hazard window, and if you highlight over it, it'll kind of give you the same disclaimer that I just gave now. And the toggle to turn looping on and off is like right there in the middle, so it's really easy to do. I'm just now seeing that the tavern also has a chat. Sorry, I didn't see the chat at the beginning. I'm still kind of getting used to this new Discord feature. But Mogi asks, what will the Looper UI show when it would push it past supply cap? Right now, it's probably just going to fail out. So we'll have to add some kind of front end indicator there. Yeah, for right now, that would just fail out. And then, yeah. Okay, so do we want to cover anything else on the looper, or should we go to the next topic?
Yeah, I mean, next topic that was missing was that I added to our agenda was the relock period, like I was saying a bit earlier. Do you want to say something about the lock boost, the relock boost, and what it implies for those relocking?
Yeah, let's touch on that briefly just to give a little bit more detail. Right, so our staking system has three options. You know, you can not lock your tokens. You can lock your tokens for 3 months, or you can lock your tokens for 6 months. And the benefits of locking for 3 or 6 months basically are you get more ETH yield, and you also get to participate in the gauge system. If you're not locking your load, you don't get to participate in the gauge system. This is sort of for technical reasons. Related to our audit with Halborn, we had to remove the ability for non-locked people to participate. So maybe one day that feature will exist, but for now it does not. So anybody who may have chosen to lock their tokens for 3 months, their relocking period is going to become available very soon. Basically, how this whole thing works with locking your tokens is for the first 80% of your locking period. So for a 3-month locking period, this is about 10 weeks, and for a 6-month locking period, this is about 20 weeks. For that first 10 or 20 weeks, you're allowed to add to your stake and still benefit from the boost. So hypothetically, 9 weeks into a 3-month lock, you can add tokens on at that point and get all the benefits of an increased boost, but your tokens will be coming off their unlock in 2 weeks rather than sort of 3 months. However, the caveat is after that sort of 80% period, so for the last 2 weeks of a 3-month stake or the last 4 weeks of a 6-month stake, that option becomes disabled. So you can no longer add tokens to your stake until sort of one of 3 things happen. Number one, your locking period ends and you decide to withdraw your load, which at that point would clear any bonuses you have. Number two, you decide to relock your tokens, which basically means, you would add on an additional 3 or 6 months worth of locking period, which gives additional bonuses. And at that point, you would be allowed to stake additional tokens again and get the same bonus that is applying to your old tokens. And then the third option is to sort of just simply do nothing. And I know that doesn't really sound like it's much of an option, but if you just simply sit and do nothing, you don't add tokens, you don't take away tokens, then you'll sort of in perpetuity be earning that boosted rate. You just can't add additional tokens to it. So if you chose to lock for 3 months, let's say, and 4 months goes by and you still haven't done anything, on month 4, you're still earning tokens as if you locked for 3 months. So it just kind of basically lasts until you take some new action, right? Either adding tokens or ending your stake.
But can you after 4 months click on the relock button?
Yes.
And then get your boost after 4 months? Of course.
Yes. you lose the option to relock when you is basically when you pull money out of your stake, right? So
Yep.
if you have $100 worth of load staked, and after 4 months you decided to withdraw, say $50 worth of load, and you left the other 50 in there, like when you do that, you're also forfeiting your right to relock.
Yeah, I think from now it's gonna an interesting play is gonna start happening when it comes to voting power, staking power. I'm looking forward to work with Shogun to get some June analytics on that, just to have the staking power of to know the repartitions, right? Because from now on you'll see some people having way more than others, especially after 6 months. I think it's gonna get very interesting, and the gamifications behind it definitely worth a shot.
Yeah, and then obviously another thing that we've got in the pipeline uh, is our hopefully we're eventually going to be releasing our bribe network. This is something we've mentioned before. Won't give too many details on this yet because we still have a couple things kind of cooking behind the scenes. But that's still on our agenda list, is to create this bribe framework and try to also monetize people's voting power, right? So basically whales who have large positions on Lodestar, who would like to see themselves get more incentives, right? Like they would be willing to pay to like amplify emissions to certain markets that they're participating in, right? So we want to be able to facilitate these kinds of transactions, which will ultimately just further increase the amount of yield that ultimately goes to load stakers via the fees it's charged.
I mean, you are dropping the alpha here, another alpha that I wasn't planning on speaking on, but there will be some updates this week regarding the bribes, but I won't say more about it.
All right, so I think we've kind of covered our main topics that we wanted to discuss. So we can kind of open it up for a little Q&A real quick, and we'll close it out. Any questions in the chat?
Yeah, Mogi's typing.
Yeah, we'll leave it open for a couple minutes to see if we have some questions. General partnership comments. What do you mean, Mogi? Can you elaborate the question, please? Vault integrations. Okay, yeah, I can talk about one of these. Yeah, that's what I was gonna mention. Right now I've been kind of meeting with FactorDAO a little bit, trying to build out some possible interesting partnerships between us. I would really like for them to participate in the Load Wars via creating some like Load Wars enabled vaults. So we're in some discussions with that team about potentially doing something like that. We've had some good conversations, and I think we're on the same page. But more details to be kind of announced on that as we kind of firm up some details. But the quick version is this would ultimately like kind of streamline the whole Lodestar like protocol into like one like managed vault, where like a user, rather than like come in and create their own like position on the app and then have their own staking like account on our staking site and do their own voting through the gauge system. What instead they could do would be to say simply just deposit some USDC into a vault, and then that vault would do some type of strategy, maybe a looping strategy or a delta neutral strategy. There's different options. But let's just use, say, a looping strategy for the sake of this argument. And then basically all of the load that vault earns would be staked and locked to gain voting power. And then on a weekly basis, the vault contract would vote to incentivize the assets that are, the vault holds. And then, so the following week, a larger percentage of emissions would go to the vault, and then the vault would be able to take those emissions and then lock them again, and just sort of kind of create this endless looping cycle where over time, the vaults are getting more and more voting power. It's pulling load off of the market and locking it up. And like people can sort of vote with their wallets in a sense where whatever vault like gets the most TVL is ultimately going to get the most like voting power via the gauge system, and will be able to like execute the most influence in terms of like incentivizing the assets within that vault, right? So yeah, it could be a kind of an interesting dynamic. Hopefully, like I said, we'll have a little bit more firm details on that. But that's kind of the system we're going for.
I mean, among others, we've also had other discussions with some protocols that would be willing to integrate these load wars. Definitely narratively keeping in mind and speaking with every actor of the ecosystem, and there've been a few that could be in the interest of using our markets as lending blocks while getting in the ownership of the money market. So definitely, this is the narrative that we're trying to bring when it comes um, to partnerships, but also co-marketing. There are a few protocols that have been building auto-compounding vaults. We'd rather just be direct to them and tell them that this is the narrative we're looking at when it comes to our emissions, keeping it, staking it, and taking ownership of a Lodestar.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Waffle. I think basically when it comes to vaults, we want to make sure that like ultimately the incentives are aligned for everybody, including our community. And there's not like a lot of value for us to be promoting like protocols that are building some type of strategy, like sort of that involves just cheating away load, because obviously that damages all of our holders. So generally speaking, like we're staying away from anything like that. But protocols that want to build and integrate into the load wars and use their load to accrue governance power, which will ultimately get them more ETH via the staking. Like that's the kind of vaults that we're trying to target and the kind of people we're trying to work with. So that's kind of where we're at with that. Next question was any new listings in the works? We don't have anything that's directly in the pipeline at the moment. Like there's no upcoming releases necessarily. However, there's a few things that we are looking at. I don't know if we're ready to release any of them just yet, just because we're kind of still in the early phases. But there's a short list of say 3 or 4 coins that we've been discussing internally as a team, as well as having some conversations with the protocol associated with those coins. But there'll be some more news kind of coming out on that front as we sort of firm up some of those conversations.
I mean, what would you guys want to see listed? That's also interesting to hear. Keep in mind that we need liquidity and ideally a chain link feed. But if you guys have we can look at the chain link feed, so it's rather straightforward. Like Radiant, Pendle is available. Jones assets, like you say, Mogi, would be great. But the pricing relies on the other oracles than Chainlink, which we're not against, but we'd rather keep for the V2. And Chainlink has proven itself along the years. So we rather rely the pricing of the V1 only on Chainlink. So like I was saying, we have Pendle, Radiant, Staked Fraxi, Camelot. Yes, I've been speaking with the boys at Camelot. No Chainlink feed yet, but I'd love to have Grail on Lodestar. Its value keeps going up because of the buyback. So it's a great non-yield bearing asset that compounds its yield, I'd say. So yeah.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
stacked frac seat would be great. I know they'll be bringing some liquidity with the step incentives, and their stacking yield on staked frac seat is better than on the wrap staked ETH. Wrap staked ETH is 4%. At Frax it's 6.5%. So it's even more interesting to leverage it.
yeah, definitely. I mean, I think ultimately, the main two things that we're looking for when we're adding new assets is number one, stable and reliable price feeds, and number two, having sustainable liquidity. That way we can always like safely process enough liquidations without putting anybody's TVL at risk on the platform. I realize that caps and restrictions are often kind of annoying to deal with. I've seen a few comments in the chat already about raising caps, and trust me, guys, we on the team, we want to see the TVL on Lodestar grow as well. Growth is obviously good for us. It's good for you guys. But we just have to do it in a responsible way. And I think if you've been with us for a while at this point, I think you know now that we tend to stay like a little bit more on the conservative side when it comes to these kind of things. And, we do that because we want to make sure that we're offering, a safe product for everybody to use. It's just not worth it for us to take an unnecessary risk. I think we're all really proud of the protocol as it is. And, we can continue to do great and innovative things without having to take those types of risks. So when we look at new assets, as Waffle was saying, those are kind of some pretty core requirements to be listed on V1, which is that you need to have a stable and reliable price feed, and there needs to be sustainable liquidity with which we can process liquidations with safely. There's some ideas we have for V2 that can sequester risk. And once we can effectively sequester risk better, that kind of opens the door to do things that are a little bit more risky, but without putting, everybody else on the platform, at risk. Like one fundamental sort of limitation, with our current architecture is that you're only as secure as your weakest link. And so you don't want to have any weak links. And that's kind of, why we operate the way that we do. Yeah, it's definitely something we're looking at, Karn. Strongly looking at that for V2. On caps, do we know the max TVL could reach if every market hits current caps? Well, I suppose that depends, Mogi, on like what the price of the underlying asset is, right? So it would be easy to determine it, but you'd have to kind of determine it within the context of the prices at any given time. But just to sort of touch on caps a little bit more, some of the caps that we have in place are for liquidity reasons, but some of them are also just sort of in place to prevent uncontrolled growth. So, for example, like USDT. Let's look at that as an example. I think right now the supply cap on USDT is 5 million. We just we just don't want to have uncontrolled growth or any potential flash loan manipulation going on. So we have this cap. But if USD or USDT reaches that 5 million cap, like we'll just raise the cap because there's plenty of liquidity for USDT, very reliable chain link feed, and we can easily liquidate millions and millions of dollars worth of USDT safely. All right, so that cap's not really in place for like any liquidity purposes. It's just in place because right now it's not disruptive for day-to-day users, but it also just prevents somebody from randomly coming by with like some type of flash loan manipulation and try to mess around with anything. So again, it just kind of doubles back to our sort of conservative philosophy where we want to avoid taking unnecessary risks and just try to really maintain a very safe platform. We want growth, but we want to have growth in a controlled way. That really sort of maximizes the risk versus return.
Before the step, I imagine that we will raise the caps during the few days before the distribution begins, just to make it as smooth possible, especially for the assets like you're mentioning, wrapped Bitcoin, ETH. These ones have no liquidity issue when it comes to on-chain.
Yeah, exactly.
But I guess for Magic, DPX could be a bit more challenging. GMX, I don't think we're at cap on GMX. We're a bit far away yet.
Yeah,
Still need to market out there.
Space. I think that the main ones that are kind of liquidity restricted are wrap staked ETH, Magic, Dopex. To some of maybe at a lesser extent, Frax. Like it's got plenty for the caps that we have set, but that it doesn't have as much liquidity as the other stablecoins. Let's just put it that way. So that one it's not really liquidity restricted right now, but it could become liquidity restricted.
Yeah, to answer to loser, Poison Finance, they didn't yet migrate. You could mint some synthetics with Lodestar markets with the LUSDC tokens. So you could deposit USDC and mint and short whatever energy and synthetic you wanted there. But I think they need to migrate now to our V1. And also we're in touch with discussing regarding the integration of the load wars into that and them accumulating some load tokens. But I'm just waiting on them.
All right, let's do one last question. If there's any one more questions, and then we'll wrap up. We're coming up on the end of the hour here, so we'll take one more question if anybody's got one. Who's winning the World Series? I couldn't even tell you who's playing in the World Series, Mogi, so I don't know.
Honestly, real question. What's the World Series? Is it tennis?
No, it's baseball.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I played baseball as a young kid, but I never got into watching baseball, man. I just find it to be such a boring sport.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I compare it to cricket. It's the same.
Yeah.
Very, very slow and boring. Holy hell.
I'm more of like a college football kind of guy, and even then, like it's become so hard for me to keep up with it.
You played football?
No, I mean, I didn't play in college. I played in high school though. But I'm a fan of the sport, I would say.
Yeah.
But all right, I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up here. Thank you guys for the attendance today. Keep an eye out for the newsletter that's going to be coming out soon, and keep an eye out on the forums because, like we mentioned at the beginning, got an exciting proposal that should be going up very soon. That I think Lodestar stakers or load stakers are going to be very happy to see, and it should be good.
Thank you, everyone. See you around and have a good Sunday.
All right. Thank you guys.